Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
I'm Jason Miller. Tonight on the Evan Miller Report, Al-Sadr Front's commander is killed in an airstrike in Syria. We have the latest on that. Also tonight, Boko Haram militants killed dozens in a raid in a Nigerian village. NATO and Russia are exchanging words today, reminiscent of Cold War days. This as a Russian policeman gets 15 years sentence for spying for the U.S. And Republican Senate Majority Leader and BS artist Mitch McConnell is backing off plans to fast-track a vote on legislation that calls lawmakers to be able to reject or approve a future nuclear deal with Iran. We have all those stories and more. Plus, Corey Evan has the breaking news out of Los Angeles. Apparently a movie actor has crashed a plane. Tell us more, Cor.
Yes, apparently Harrison Ford's plane is down, but in my opinion, our hero is not out. I have the details on his trip to the hospital coming up. The death penalty for Jodi Arias, however, is out for now. And halfway around the world in the Koreas, I've got stories from each Korea dueling for my attention. I'll explain that in a bit. Banking in Britain is starting to sound like banking in America in our business report. And today's special edition of Lawsuits Around the World takes us to India. We have all that coming up in today's Evan Miller Report, where Jason Miller is in to talk to us in our conservative news sources, starting now. I messed that up.
Live from Southern California, this is the Evan Miller Report. Jason Miller with news and politics, Corey Evan with business and entertainment. This is the Evan Miller Report on SHR Media. Here now, Jason Miller.
And a very good evening on this Thursday, March the 5th, 2015, and it's good to be back with you on this Thursday. I'm Jason Miller, along with Corey Evan this evening, and as Corey stated, we will have the latest on Harrison Ford's plane crash in Venice here in California, coming up later in the entertainment report tonight. So that's an ever-developing story right now, and of course we'll get you the very latest coming up in entertainment tonight. Also coming up tonight on the program, Palestinian leaders say they'll cut security coordination with Israel. We'll have more on that story. And independent tests are showing that Argentina's special prosecutor, Neisman, was murdered. But first, ladies and gentlemen, we start off in Syria tonight, where the military chief of Syria's al-Nusra Front militant group has been killed in an airstrike, according to the group. The jihadist group said on social media that 3 other leaders were killed alongside Abu Hamam al-Shami. Syria's state-run news agency said the army had targeted Nusra leaders as they met in northern Idlib province, according to the AP. The Nusra Front is one of the most powerful groups fighting to overthrow Syria's President Bashar al-Assad. It was involved in a major attack on the Air Force Intelligence headquarters in the embattled city of Aleppo on Wednesday. The group has long been considered an affiliate of al-Qaeda, although recent reports suggest it may be seeking to break those ties. The U.S. listed as a terrorist group, and it is under UN Security Council sanctions. News of the latest attack came as the UN's envoy for Syria, Staffan de Mistura, hinted to BBC News 24 that the UN might negotiate with al-Nusra to allow much-needed aid to enter Aleppo. Al-Nusra named the 3 other leaders killed on Thursday as Abdul Masab Fasalti, Abdul Amor Kardari, and Abdul Basar Aserni. Details of the attack are still unclear. However, the official Syrian news agency described it as a unique operation carried out by the Syrian army in the Al-Habitat area. Suspected Boko Haram militants have killed at least 64 people in a village in Borno State, northeast of Nigeria. The gunmen who stormed Niamey targeted men and boys before setting the village on fire, according to survivors. The raid happened early on Tuesday, but was not reported immediately because of the remoteness of the area. Boko Haram has killed thousands of people in its drive to establish an Islamic State in that country. The raid on Najab came as many villagers were attending morning prayers, a witness quoted by the news website Shahir Reporters. Fahmy Al-Dalda said there was pandemonium when the shooting started. He said, quote, "I ran into the bush. Since then, I have never seen my husband and 3 children," she said. "I came back to our village in the afternoon. Dead bodies were scattered everywhere." Another witness said the bodies of victims, including many men with their throats slit, were in the mosque. Other villagers caught by the gunmen outside the mosque had been shot, she said. Najab is about 62 miles south of the state capital, Majagreen. Ejam Waldo, a Majurian resident who comes from Najaf, told the Reuters news agency and ITN that 2 of his relatives had also been killed. Boko Haram controls large areas of Borno State, but in recent months has also carried out cross-border raids into Chad, Cameroon, and Niger. All right, over to Russia tonight, ladies and gentlemen, where NATO and Russia are exchanged in a heated language reminiscent of the Cold War days. On to today, with accusations of sinister geopolitical plotting and human rights abuses flying across an increasingly deep divide. NATO's top U.S. civilian official Alexander Versbo said today that an angry revisionist Russia was stopping at little to reestablish its clout in Europe, including redrawing borders by force to achieve its goals. Versbo's, the Alliance Deputy Secretary General, told a conference in Latvia that President Vladimir Putin's aim seems to be to turn Ukraine into a failed state and to suppress and discredit alternative voices to Russia, so as to prevent a Russian Maidan, referring to the Ukraine's uprising which ousted Moscow ally Viktor Yanukovych as president last year. He rattled off a litany of harsh accusations against the Kremlin. Under Putin, Versbo said Russia had developed a new form of hybrid warfare combining military intimidation, disguised intervention, the covert supply of weapons, and weapon systems. In Moscow, Russia's Deputy Defense Minister Abdul Altaf blasted the West for trying to enforce its will on others and cast Russia as an enemy. He condemned NATO's decision to create command and control centers in the Baltic states and 3 other eastern allies, and to upgrade a headquarters unit in Poland, calling their moves a clear signal that the alliance views Russia much as it once did in the Soviet Union. And for once, ladies and gentlemen, I will agree with the Russian Deputy Defense Minister on this one, as in saying, you guys caused this, so no wonder they have to make a move on it. All right, folks, staying in Russia, a Russian police officer was convicted today on charges of spying for the United States, using a keg disguised as a rock, and sentenced to 15 years in prison. It was the latest in a host of spy cases amid rising Russia-Western tensions, as we reported in our last story. The Moscow City Court found Rosman Yushkov guilty of treason for handing over classified information to the United States. Prosecutors produced his messages, which contained sensitive information about the Interior Ministry, as well as a rock-like keg, that's computer keg, ladies and gentlemen, with cash and a letter from the CIA, according to the Interfax news agency. Interfax quoted prosecutor Viktor Antipov as saying Yushkov was caught red-handed, pleaded guilty, gave detailed testimony about his contacts with U.S. intelligence. Antipov said Yushkov worked in Siberia, but gave no further details. The court said Yushkov was arrested back in 2013 while trying to open the keg, which contained $37,000 for his information, and a letter from the CIA with further instructions. Palestinian leaders in the West Bank said Thursday they would halt the security coordination with Israel, which is widely credited with keeping order in the territory and preventing attacks in Israel. The Palestinian Central Council, whose votes are usually binding on the Western-backed Palestinian Authority, said it made the decision because Israel had breached bilateral agreements, including by withholding tax revenues it collects on behalf of the Palestinians. A spokesman for President Mahmoud Abbas, who must make the official decision to sever security ties with Israel was not available, and it was unclear whether the PCC decision would go immediately into effect. An Israeli official asked about the decision told Reuters and ITN there have been no changes in security cooperation. Israel said in January it was freezing up to $127 million of monthly Palestinian tax revenue in protest against Abbas's decision to apply for membership at the International Criminal Court and pursue war crime charges against Israel. The tax money covers around two-thirds of the Palestinian budget and is used to pay tens of thousands of public sector employees. A statement issued by the 110-member PCC read, quote, "Security coordination in all its forms with the authority of Israel occupation will be stopped in the light of its Israel non-compliance with the agreement signed between the two sides." It also said Israel should shoulder all its responsibilities toward the Palestinian people in the occupied state of Palestine as an occupation authority according to international law. End quote. An end to the agreement on security coordination, which dates from the Oslo Peace Accords of the mid-1990s, could have an immediate impact on stability in West Bank cities such as Hebron, Nablus, and Jin, where anti-Israel unrest is common. Palestinian security forces also require Israel permission to send patrols into some areas of the West Bank to preserve law and order. Independent tests now show that Argentina Special Prosecutor Abdul Nisman was murdered. This coming from his family today. At a news conference, Mr. Nisman's ex-wife said the findings ruled out theories of accident or suicide. Mr. Nisman was found dead in his home back on January the 18th of this year, hours before he was due to testify in their Congress against President Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner. He was probing Argentina's deadliest terrorist attack, the 1994 bombing of a Buenos Aires Jewish center. Sandra Arezzo, Mr. Nisman's ex-wife, said a team of experts had made their conclusions based on reports from a post-mortem examination and existing forensic evidence. Ms. Ranzo Sado, a federal judge, added that her report was at the disposal of the prosecutor and judge involved with the official investigation into Mr. Nisman's death. Despite telling journalists the report's conclusions, Ms. Arozzo has not yet released the full details of the document. An update on a story we brought to you yesterday here on the Evan Miller Report. UK Prime Minister David Cameron has denied claims he is scared of TV election debates, saying he wanted to get on with his proposal for a seven-way contest. Labour leader Ed Miliband, though, has accused the Prime Minister of cowering from the public after he rejected proposals for a head-to-head debate with the Labour leader. But the Prime Minister claimed the broadcasters were to blame. Meanwhile, the BBC Trust, which runs BBC One over in the UK, has rejected the Democratic Unionist Party appeal against its inclusion from the debates. The decision is likely to trigger a judicial review by the DUP. Explaining his decision to reject the broadcasters' debates proposals, Mr. Cameron said that rather than ducking scrutiny, he wanted to unblock the logjam the broadcasters helped to create. He said, quote, "Let's get on. Let's have the debate that matters the most. By putting forward a proposal for a debate with 7 leaders, we'll actually see one take place," he said. Mr. Miliband said he did not accept the Prime Minister's excuse and accused him of, quote, "running scared from the TV debates." He continued to say, quote, "I'll debate him anytime, any place, anywhere. He should stop ducking and weaving, and he should name the date," said the Labour leader. He continued to say, "I think what the public will not tolerate is a Prime Minister who is running away from them," that being the debates, running away from his record, and running away from the face-to-face debate with me that he said he wanted and the public deserved. Lib Dem election campaign chief Lord Ashdown said Mr. Cameron was running scared and was afraid of defending his own position. What he's proposing is not just ludicrous, 7-sided bite-sized squabble fest, but actually he is proposing it takes place before the Conservative Manifesto was published, he told BBC's Radio 4 Today program. Mr. Clegg said if David Cameron is too busy or too important to defend the record of this government with Ed Miliband, then I offer myself. How about that? I'll do it instead. He told LBC's radio program that the Conservative leadership was behaving like they've ordered a drink in the drawing room of Downton Abbey. and said sort of telling everybody else what they should do. I mean, it's not for one party, do you know, grandly telling everybody else what's going to happen. Well, 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 little did I never think I see the day, Corey Evan, that a British soap program such as Downton Abbey would be made in a comparison with a British Prime Minister's debate.
And it's actually really relevant, excuse me.
Certainly right. Well, as I say, don't drink too much, guys, before the debate, if the debate does happen, because you don't you don't need to be making a fool of yourself like recent BS artists have done at presidential debates here in the U.S. And I'm not going to name names, but I think the audience knows who we've talked about. Two previous Democrats who made fools of themselves.
Yes, I don't think we need to rehash those.
Absolutely right. All right, moving on. Bolivia's former top policeman, who had previously been in charge of its counter-narcotics force, is being held on suspicion of illicit enrichment and links to the drugs trade. General Oscar Nin led Bolivia's National Politics Police Force that's the National Police Force, not the National Politics Force. I apologize. That's the National Police Force from the year 2010 until 2011. His wife, daughter, and son were also arrested and have been charged with illicit enrichment as well. Bolivia is the world's third largest producer of cocaine after Peru and Colombia. All right, folks, I'll have more D.C. news, including Mitch McConnell now backing off a bill to disregard any new Iran deal that might happen. That's in the D.C. news coming up. Also on Global Socialism tonight, sledding banned in the U.S. Capitol. Why? That's all part of Global Socialism tonight. But first, we send it over to Corey Evan up in Los Angeles, and he has some of the day's other news. Corey, take it away.
I would never be able to have my children living there if that's the case. But at any rate, a court in Singapore has sentenced 2 German men to be caned and serve 9 months in prison for spray painting graffiti on the commuter train carriage. Andreas von Noor, age 22, Elton Hintz, age 21, pled guilty to breaking into a train depot in Bishan and spraying the SMRT train last November, according to the UK Independent. They fled Singapore after being accused of vandalism and trespass, but were tracked down in neighboring Malaysia and brought back to face trial. Both men issued public apologies when they appeared in court dressed in prison uniforms for sentencing, according to Reuters. Von Noor described the situation as, quote, the darkest period of my life. Singapore uses the rattan cane to carry out the sentence. Prisoners are stripped and strapped to a wooden trestle, while a medical officer waits on standby. The city-state handed out over 2,000 caning sentences in 2012. Over 1,000 of those were foreigners caned for immigration offenses, according to the U.S. State Department. Human Rights Watch condemned caning as a form of torture and said Singapore's decision to use it as a punishment is, quote, indicative of a blatant disregard for international human rights standards. In Berlin, a foreign ministry official said the government respected the sovereignty of Singapore, but stressed that, quote, it speaks out against corporal punishment as a form of sentence worldwide. We here at the Evan Miller Report would love to debate you on that one. But moving on. The man who attacked the American ambassador to South Korea on Thursday morning is a fringe political analyst with a violence, and he acted alone when he rushed the diplomat and slashed his face with a knife, the South Korean police said to the New York Times. The man, Kim Ki-jong, who the police said used a 10-inch knife to attack Ambassador Mark W. Lippert at a breakfast meeting, on the Japanese ambassador to South Korea in 2010, and was known to sometimes stage nationalistic one-man protests. Mr. Kim said he assaulted Mr. Lippert on protest of continuing joint exercises between the U.S. and South Korea, which some South Koreans fear make reconciliation with North Korea harder, if it's still at all possible. But anyway, although anti-American sentiment has sometimes revealed itself in South Korea, a strong U.S. ally, in recent years those feelings have mostly moved to the fringes of society as North Korea's nuclear threat has grown and China aggressively asserted its influence in the region. Professor DeLury said Mr. Lippert, who became ambassador last year, had won fans among South Koreans, quote, with an almost boyish enthusiasm for being in Korea and penchant for taking strolls in public. Mr. Lippert was in stable condition today after surgery, said Robert W. Ogburn, a spokesman at the American Embassy. The ambassador suffered a 4-inch-long cut to the right side of his face, which required 80 stitches, as well as stab wounds on his left arm and hand, which he appeared to have sustained while resisting the attack, doctors at Yonsei University Severance Hospital in Seoul said. Mr. Lippert, who often interacts with the South Korean public through social media, was upbeat on Thursday on Twitter. Mr. Lippert ended his message with a Korean phrase which the U.S. had adopted as a motto for the alliance, Gachi Gapsida, or Let's Go Together. Hundreds of local well-wishers left messages on his family. Yeah, and some apologized for the attack. The attack shook the government of South Korea, raising questions about lapses in security. After an emergency meeting of vice ministers, the government vowed a stern punishment for officials for failing to protect Mr. Lippert. We'll have to see if any of that comes to fruition, but I have my doubts. The Korean pastor from Toronto, Canada, who has disappeared in North Korea, is an outdoorsy guy who likes to ice fish and whose last trip abroad was to help villagers in the Amazon, according to clergy of his Light Korean Presbyterian Church, according to the Christian Science Monitor. Reverend Hyun-Soo Lim, who grew up in South Korea but emigrated to Toronto in 1988, has become the latest in a series of religious figures to disappear or be detained in the North. Last fall, American Korea pastor Kenneth Bae was released after being sentenced to a labor camp. The pastor has been to North Korea more than 100 times, but has not been heard from since January 31st when he crossed the Chinese border to enter the country's far north region of Regin. His plan was to visit orphanages and a nursing facility that the Toronto church, where he is chief pastor, helps financially. Lim arrived on January 31st, but was subject to a 21-day isolation period that the North has instituted to test for Ebola, they say. Lim has undergone similar incommunicado situations before, but has always been in touch afterward. Not this time, and after February 21st, the church and Canadian authorities became concerned. While a number of media reports claim that Lim disappeared shortly after being invited to Pyongyang by authorities, Ms. Pak is adamant that, quote, there's no factual basis for the stories that are datelined out of Seoul, calling them speculation. Lim, who is married and has one son, has been pastor of Light Korean Presbyterian for 28 of the 30 years he's lived in Canada. The church has 3,000 members, is evangelical, and engages in missions all over the world. Lim is very good with young people, they say. He likes all foods, not just Korean, takes members on ice fishing, retreats, and is sturdy, solidly built, says Pak. Right, moving on to the U.S., the jury could not reach a unanimous decision in the sentencing of convicted killer Jodi Arias, and the judge declared a mistrial. The verdict, released today, comes after a second jury considered her case because the first jury, which convicted her of murder 2 years ago, could also not agree on whether to sentence her to death. Now that this second jury was hung, Judge Sherry Stevens is tasked with deciding Arias' sentence, whether she will be in prison for life or have the possibility of parole after 25 years. The death penalty is no longer a possibility. Any rate, the Boston Marathon bombing trial picked up on its second day with searing testimony from survivors, including Jeff Bauman, a spectator who lost his lower legs in the twin blasts and had an eerie encounter with a young man he later identified as one of the alleged attackers. This coming to us from NBC News. The jury also heard from William Richard, whose 8-year-old son died and 6-year-old daughter lost a leg in the explosions. Another father who watched his young son writhe in pain from a massive leg wound, his leg was blown apart, and police officers who tried to save victims were among them. The testimony was part of a federal prosecutor's effort to detail the depth of pain and agony wrought by the April 15, 2013 bombing, allegedly carried out by Dzhokhar Tsarnaev and his older brother Tamerlan. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev is on trial for detonating one of 2 pressure cooker bombs that rocked the race's crowded final stretch. 3 people died in the blast, and a 4th, an MIT police officer, was shot to death during the ensuing manhunt. Tamerlan Tsarnaev died in a shootout with police 4 days after the attack. Good riddance. And, of course, Dzhokhar's lawyers have testified during the testimony hearings yesterday that it was indeed Dzhokhar who set off those bombs. So, Dzhokhar, it's not looking good for you. And finally, a Southwest Florida man put his dead neighbor in the bed of his pickup truck and drove, bloody and agitated, to his lawyer's office where he said he had killed the man in self-defense, according to the Orlando Sentinel. John Marshall showed up Wednesday afternoon. His attorney, Robert Harris, said, quote, that he was bleeding and flustered. Harris said he brought Marshall into the office, and that's when he said the man's body was in the truck parked outside. Harris called 911. Lee County Sheriff spokesman Tony Shaw said the agency is investigating. He would not say whether any charges are pending or give other details. He said only that an investigation is underway. Officials identified the dead man as Theodore Hubble, Jr. Marshall lives in Cape Coral near Fort Myers and had purchased property off a dirt road in a rural neighborhood called Bokeelia, Harris said. Marshall and his wife planned to build a house and had built a shed on the property, and they kept a camper there, Harris said. The neighbor didn't want Marshall to build in the rural area, Harris said. A few days before the incident, Marshall and the neighbor argued, Harris said. Marshall called Harris, who advised his client to get a restraining order. Harris said Marshall called police and reported the incident, but a restraining order had not been issued. The sheriff's office did not immediately respond to inquiries about a report from Marshall. Imagine that, driving to your lawyer's office with a dead body. When have I ever heard that before? I can't recall the last time. And while I try to think...
One of those CSI shows. I think somebody's been watching too much TV.
Unfortunately. Sir, it's time for you to go to bed. And I hope you make sure to get well rested before you try going anywhere. Oh, yeah, that's right. You are in deep trouble. But at any rate, I will go ahead and send it to break. When we come back, we spend the day at the banks today in our business report. Woo freaking who. We deal with rapes in India in a very special Lawsuits Around the World. And Han Solo's craft is down in SoCal, but the medics have him taken care of, so he should be able to be back in battle soon. That's this newsman's humble little opinion. And Jay, what do you got in DC news today?
Thanks, Corey. Coming up in D.C. news today, Senate Majority Leader and BS Mitch McConnell is now backed off plans to fast-track a vote on legislation that would reject or approve a future nuclear deal with Iran. Also, one California legislator has decided to seek Barbara Boxer's upcoming Senate seat in 2016. Also, in global socialism, are you shopping at Target? Better be careful. It might be a Sharia-compliant store. Also,
no.
American children in New York now have to observe a Muslim holiday. We'll tell you which one when we come back on the Evan Miller Report, your conservative news source, after this break on SHR Media.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Is radio.
Fact news. Fact news.
Radio.
Fact news. Fact news.
Radio.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Sean and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or follow my blog. Now, back to the Sackheads.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
In a moment, cancer changed our lives forever.
We were told nothing could be done to enjoy these final moments together.
But in that moment, when all seemed lost, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital gave us hope.
Because at this moment, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital is saving lives with pioneering research and care. We're changing the way the world treats childhood cancer by sharing our discoveries with doctors and scientists everywhere.
And we'll never have to pay St. Jude for anything, ever.
At this moment, she wants to be in her own bed.
I want to be back at school with my friends. I want to be outside playing.
Please take a moment and join St. Jude in finding cures and saving children. Visit stjude.org.
There's the closing bell. That can only mean one thing. The business report on the Evan Miller Report. I'm Corey Evan. Jason Miller will be back with the DC News in just a few moments. But first, the Dow is up just at...
All right, folks. Looks like we lost Corey
Apple
Evan here.
stock is down, but that's the only red. Yeah, I'm just a little behind, I guess, because of the Skype feed. But anyway, I was just saying that all the stock numbers are up except for Apple, which is suffering a minor loss, but that's nothing. The euro headed for a third weekly drop before the ECB starts buying bonds, and the U.S. releases job data that may back speculation the Fed will raise interest rates this year. The shared currency dropped below $1.10 for the first time since September of 2003 and tumbled for a sixth day on Thursday as ECB President Mario Draghi set a start date on Monday for his plan to purchase 1.1 trillion euros, that's $1.2 trillion worth of debt. A gauge of the dollar rallied to the highest in more than 10 years as economists estimated data on Friday will show gains in non-farm payrolls stayed above 200,000 for a 12th straight month. The euro sank as much as 0.8% to $1.09 on Thursday before trading at $1.10 at 9:13 a.m. in Tokyo. Its six-day slide was the longest in more than a year. The 19-nation currency has tumbled 1.5% this week. That's a huge drop, ladies and gentlemen. The ECB debt purchases will total 60 billion euros each month and run through September 2016. Draghi told reporters in Nicosia, Cyprus, after a policy meeting. He said the central bank may buy bonds with yields as low as the deposit rate, which was at minus 0.2% Thursday. The ECB kept the main refinancing rate at a record low 0.05%. The euro will probably weaken to parity with the dollar early next year, said Vasily Serebryakov, a New York-based foreign exchange strategist at BNP Paribas SA. The currency's last traded on a one-for-one basis in December 2002. The Fed of New York, once the most powerful regulator among the 12 Fed banks, has been stripped of its power over large banks, according to USA Today. A Federal Reserve Committee will take over. Janet Yellen was freaking out 6 years ago. Quote, things are now so bad that I actually opened Fed staff economic projections with greater trepidation than my 401k, unquote. Banks get the results of their stress tests today, showing whether their capital ratios meet minimum requirements. Wednesday, they will hear from the Fed if they can return capital to shareholders. Points will be taken off for smart aleck answers. Negative interest rates cause headaches for bank computer systems in Europe. Oh yeah, and they slice a small bit of your account every single day. So, the Bank of England thankfully has refused to join the negative interest rate club, which includes Sweden, Denmark, Switzerland, and the ECB. A federal judge has dropped Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan from a suit alleging the investment banks fixed aluminum prices by keeping supplies artificially low. And another don't nuts. Citigroup forgot to send 23,000 settlement checks to borrowers owed money for mishandled loan papers and robo-signed documents. No word whether the bank will charge itself late fees. Let's hope that they figure that out. Yep, that's what I've got from the U.S. Yeah, I know. Imagine that coming from the USA Today, folks. But then again, they are trying to keep their numbers up. I don't blame them for typing that up.
Of their competition television program, The Today Show, which is in statistical last place, thanks to Good Morning Asinine. But that's another for another day.
Well, anything to be better than the CBS This Morning show. I hear they've been at the bottom of the barrel for a long time, haven't they?
They're literally scraping the scraps of your last year's Thanksgiving dinner that you ate there, Corey.
Yeah, I've been wondering why they would change the name of the show from The Early Show to CBS This Morning. They must be desperate. But at any rate, the Bank of England, getting back to business, has kept interest rates on hold at 0.5%, marking 6 years of record low rates in the UK. Rates have now remained at a record low since March 2009, when the bank also launched its money printing program known as quantitative easing to try and stimulate the economy. The bank initially undertook £75 billion of asset purchases, although just 2 months later, the Monetary Policy Committee that set interest rates voted to increase purchases by a further £50 billion. The QE has remained unchanged at $375 billion since 2012. Last month, policymakers slashed their forecast for inflation and said that it was more likely than not that the UK would enter a brief period of deflation in the first half of 2015. Imagine that. They're starting to sound a little bit like the Fed here in the U.S., aren't they?
Yeah, certainly is. Sounds like global socialism to me.
Unfortunately. And with that, that is your business news. Time to hand it over to Jay for the DC news. That's what I mean to say. You could tell that I'm still recovering from running solo yesterday. Okay, so I had help from Sackhead Sean. Thank you very much, Sean. But you could tell I'm still recovering from it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Corey Evan not being used to doing DC news and him admitting that it takes a mental toll on him, it's true. It does. And I have 3 gray hairs to prove it. Thank you very much, Corey Evan. And
you got it.
And I will try to give you some advance notice next time I take a day off and go up to a special conference.
Excellent.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, to the DC news, as Corey Evan mentioned, Republican Senate Majority Leader and BS artist Mitch McConnell today backed off plans to fast-track a vote on legislation opposed by the White House that calls for lawmakers to be able to reject or approve a future nuclear deal with Iran. The decision came in the face of stiff opposition from Senate Democrats who signed on to the bill, but that said they would oppose it if it came up before a late March deadline for the United States and 5 world powers to reach an agreement with Tehran. Their stance ensured that the legislation would fail to advance in a test vote that had been expected on Tuesday of next week. McConnell's spokesman, also BS artist Don Stewart, said, quote, "The Senate will turn next to the anti-human trafficking legislation while Democrats decide whether or not they believe they and Congress as a whole should be able to review and vote on any deal the president cuts with the leaders of Iran." Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Bob Corker, the measure's principal author, welcomed McConnell's decision as a stepping stone to building a veto-proof majority in support of the proposal. He said, quote, "I greatly appreciate the majority leader's commitment to getting the Iran Nuclear Agreement Review Act across the finishing line by allowing the vote to occur at a time when we will bit more likely to generate a veto-proof majority, Corker said in a statement. All right, moving on. A California legislator who has sought to broaden the appeal of the Republican Party, not this newsman's opinion though, with Hispanics, has launched an uphill campaign for Barbara Boxer's U.S. Senate seat. You may remember Barbara Boxer earlier this year announced her retirement as she has decided not to run again for re-election in 2016. Assemblyman Rocky Chavez announced as a long shot in a state where Democrats hold every statewide office. The 63-year-old retired Marine Corps colonel from San Diego County joins a contest in which the only major candidate in the field has been State Attorney General Kamala Harris, a Democrat. Chavez's election to the legislature back in 2012 was seen as a success story, according to some, for a Republican Party often faulted for being too slow to adapt. The Hispanic grandfather has been calling for immigration reform. That's amnesty, ladies and gentlemen. So not a true conservative when he's calling for amnesty. That's strike one against you, Chavez. Okay, and it said the national health care overhaul should not be repealed. Strike two! Oh boy! Strike two in this story. Chavez says he also stresses foreign affairs and jobs. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so I may not be a political science major, but when we can read a basic AP story and this guy says he's a true conservative and he says he's for immigration reform, which in code speak, ladies and gentlemen, is amnesty, strike one there for you, and then he said the national health care should not be overhauled, should be repealed in Obamacare, oh boy, and says he'll also stress foreign affairs and jobs. So does that mean overseas jobs or United States jobs? As I quote someone from the entertainment world in an episode of Seinfeld, Mr. Chavez, nothing for you!
Or as I like to say, yeah!
So, ladies and gentlemen, will you vote for Assemblyman Chavez for Senate? I'm not, and I'm a citizen here in the state of California, ladies and gentlemen. So, if you don't want to vote for someone who supports illegal immigration or amnesty and supports Obamacare, vote for the Democrat. Vote for Kamala Harris. And by the way, this is not being funded by any campaign or political party. This is just a personal commentary by Jason Miller of the Evan Miller Report.
And I'd imagine eventually you'd like to run, but I bet you won't.
No, I already got enough gray hairs. Why do I want to join that group of Philistines?
Good point.
All right, folks. Moving on from the D.C. news, staying in D.C. now, it's time for what we like to call here on the program. And what is that, Corey?
That would be our continuing battle against global socialism. Is that you, Jay? Or is
that's me. Sorry, we had an audio fail on our soundboard, and I do apologize, ladies and gentlemen, for that, because we do not have that. Particular
my theme didn't fire.
Your theme did not fire. Matter of fact, your theme is missing in action today, so we will go without it. But Washington D.C. is having a snow day today, just a few inches, but enough to shut the place down. Most of us are working from home, but those with kids are going to need some relief. What do? Well, let's go do some sledding. For the families on Capitol Hill, the best sledding around would be right on the grounds of Capitol Hill. But the district's navigating delegate, Eleanor Holmes Norton, a Democrat, has petitioned the Capitol Police Board to lift the ban on sledding on Capitol Hill grounds from March 5th to March 8th. This could be the last snowstorm the D.C. area gets this winter, and may be one of the best for sledding in years, Ms. Norton said Wednesday in her request. Children and their parents should be able to enjoy sledding on one of the best hills in the city. But look at this. In a sudden move of bipartisanship, Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid of Nevada backed her up with his own waiver request and tweet, saying, "Co-sign RT at Eleanor Norton. I just wrote to U.S. Capitol Police requesting a waiver of the sledding ban for Thursday to Sunday." And the link is in there, and of course at Senator Harry Reid, saying, "We're not sure if there was any attempt at bipartisanship on this, but late Wednesday the board said no, citing a regulation dating back to April 29th, 1876. It bans the use of any portion of the Capitol grounds and terraces from being used as playgrounds or otherwise so far as may be necessary to protect the public property, turf, and grass from destruction or injury." Well, Corey, I don't know if this is global socialism or not, but maybe the people on the Capitol Police don't want Harry Reid to get another black eye.
True. And all that stuff about protecting the grass. If there's snow on the ground, what more damage can you do to the grass? The grass is already frozen.
And ladies and gentlemen, you've heard Corey being reporting on Target these past couple weeks in the business news.
And yesterday I mentioned that they're trying to get more Hispanics to shop with their first Spanish language commercial appearing on an English language broadcast. Thank you very much.
Well, you might think that's terrible. Well, this one might just tie them all. Are you shopping at one of the Targets supplying Islamic Sharia compliant? According to reports, Target stores have implemented a new policy that specifically caters to Muslim cashiers. The national retailer recently announced that those who object to ringing up products that contain pork are being shifted to other positions within the organization. Fox News is reporting the retailer notes that some Muslim cashiers have refused to scan products like bacon because it would interfere with their religious beliefs. Reportedly, Muslim employees would ask other cashiers and co-workers to ring up the purchases. Some even went as far as asking the customers to scan the items themselves. Target said that the Target spokeswoman and BS artist Paula Thornton Greer said, quote, in a statement, "We are confident that this is a reasonable solution for our guests and team members." Talking about the decision to offer Muslim cashiers the options of wearing gloves or shifting to other positions. She said the problem was only taking place in a specific area. She continued to say, "It's not an issue in most of our stores in the Twin Cities. There is also no indication that this is an issue in the Minnesota market overall or nationwide. Not yet, anyway. Give them time." So, ladies and gentlemen, be careful what Target you shop at. You might be subject to Sharia law. And that's just in New Jersey.
Yeah, it's everywhere in the nation now, apparently.
And we're not finished yet. Far left-wing socialist and communist New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio has successfully spearheaded an effort to shut down New York City schools on 2 Muslim holidays. One of those holidays is Eid al-Adha, which celebrates animal sacrifices. What the left and other media would have you believe is that this is just another necessary step toward greater diversity and inclusion. I call it global socialism on steroids, ladies and gentlemen. In reality,
I couldn't have said it better myself.
In reality, folks, this is a huge step towards the abyss. What the mayor and the media are leaving out of these 2 other issues: 1, the school district now has to track the lunar calendar, and by that, Islam, a spirit of Antichrist, attended by changing set times and set laws, as well as educating non-Muslims that Al-Adha celebrations start after the descent of Hula pilgrims and performing the Hajj from Mount Arafat, a hill east of Mecca. The very nice sounding idea that Muslims observe the holiday with morning prayers followed by gatherings of friends and family is only half the story. 2, the day ends up with an animal slaughter by every household in the backyard. Oh, that's great. So someone wants to come out and barbecue a steak. Now they have to hear a live animal, maybe the neighbor's dog, getting slaughtered. Isn't this great? As Robin Williams said in one movie that I won't make mention of, it's harvest time.
Oh boy! And on that note, I think this really deserves this one-liner. May I?
send it over to Corey Evan with the rest of tonight's Global Socialism, because I'm fired up right now, so fired up, I'm ready to send de Blasio a dead mouse in front of his front door.
Yes, and on that note, you might want to send another mouse to big businesses rallying behind the gay marriage cause today, as the U.S. Supreme Court scheduled oral arguments for April 28th on the contentious social issue that promises to yield one of the justice's most important rulings of the year. A total of 379 businesses and groups representing employers across various sectors, including Google, American Airlines, Goldman Sachs, and Johnson & Johnson, have signed on to a friend of the court brief in support of gay marriage that was filed on Thursday. Various supporters of gay marriage are filing similar briefs ahead of a Friday deadline. One was filed on behalf of dozens of prominent conservatives, including former Republican National Committee Chairman Ken Mehlman and David Koch, one of the billionaire Koch brothers known for donating to right-leaning political causes. The brief says that, quote, conservative values are consistent with, indeed are advanced by, affording civil marriage rights to same-sex couples. Oh, brother.
That's baloney.
It
doesn't even make any sense.
Yes, way to insult us here at SHR Media. Conservative values consistent with gay marriage. So, why are businesses trying to make me want to shop somewhere else? What am I supposed to learn on these new holidays again? And does anyone have my Rolaids? This is all giving me bad gas. Don't breathe this. Oh man, it's coming up Valentine's. Yes. Yeah, stay tuned for our continuing battle against global socialism. Yep, almost forgot my echo. Yep, I like to hear an echo in my voice, and now we got new lawsuits across America. Yep.
And now it's time for Lawsuits Across America. The cases are real. All rise for the Honorable Corey Evan.
Right, sit, people. We gotta get on this plane and take off right away. A British filmmaker has defended an interview with a convicted Indian rapist hours after authorities there launched a slew of legal measures, according to the BBC. Leslie Udwin denies claims that she broke a contract with the prison by airing the interview with the rapist convicted over the 2012 Delhi bus rape. She said India's legal actions, including a request for a global ban, had no legal or practical basis. The film has been banned in India, but the BBC showed it in the UK. In the interview, rapist
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, looks like we lost Corey Evans.
Am I still here?
Back. Let's see. Do we have you back?
Am I here? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
There we are. Skype fail. But at any rate, here's another little fail. The family of Michael Brown, the teen killed last year by Ferguson PD officer Darren Wilson, will file a civil wrongful death lawsuit in the case very shortly, attorney Anthony Gray said Thursday, adding to our continuing battle against global socialism and my bad gas. Neither he nor attorney Daryl Parks would say exactly when the suit would be filed, but they said that they disagreed with the grand jury's and the Justice Department's decisions not to charge Wilson in the shooting. Word of the lawsuit comes a day after the Justice Department determined there was not sufficient evidence to charge Wilson in Brown's death, but found in a separate investigation that the Ferguson PD showed a pattern of racial bias. Yeah, more global socialism coming up in this edition of Lawsuits Across the World, and I'm so sorry to make you guys go through it. Yes, I did that one. That was about the Indian rapist. That's the one that I mentioned. But at any rate, on that note, I will declare today's Lawsuits Across America case dismissed because our little friend... Yes, we have our breaking news. Actor Harrison Ford was injured today when a vintage World War II training plane he was piloting crash-landed on a California golf course. This, according to NBC News, the actor, who was conscious and breathing when rescue crews reached him, was stabilized and taken to a hospital where he was in fair to moderate condition, authorities said. Sources said he sustained cuts to his head. There was no word on other injuries or what caused the plane to crash at about 2:20 p.m. It appeared he was flying solo, but of course his character in the film Star Wars was, of course, named Han Solo. And, of course, Mike Bonin, an LA City Council member, agreed with all of these little measures that the NTSB are taking to investigate soon, saying, "Thank God that this incident happened on a golf course where there is a relatively open space." Yeah, thank heavens, because it could have been a lot worse for our friend Harrison Ford. He may be a liberal, but he's still a very likable person, isn't he, Jake?
Certainly is, Corey. I'm glad he was able to make it to General Hospital because he only has one life to live, and that would be losing an ever-guiding light in the Star Wars franchise.
Yes, it's not yet time for him to go to another world. Yeah, we could go down the list there, ladies and gentlemen. But back to the story. His son, Chef Ben Ford, tweeted, quote, "At the hospital, Dad is okay, battered but okay. He is every bit the man you would think he is. He is an incredibly strong man," unquote. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I predicted, his son seems to agree with me. He'll be alright. He'll be back on the set of Star Wars soon. Believe it, as Naruto would say. And getting back to our entertainment news. Sorry, I had a little bit of trouble with my phone there, but Kelly Clarkson doesn't care what anyone thinks about her weight, not even Britain's most hated woman. The singer came under fire last month after showing off a fuller figure during an appearance on the British show Graham Norton Live. Journalist and reality star Katie Hopkins, known as the most hated woman in Britain, blasted Clarkson's size on Twitter. Hopkins, who gained a reputation as the villain on The Apprentice UK, didn't leave it there. In an interview with Entertainment Tonight on Wednesday, she said, quote, "Kelly Clarkson is now a chunky monkey, if we're putting it kindly. She does look like she's eaten her back."
Alright, looks like the NSA censorship police from the FCC is censoring
Puzzled by the fat-shaming comments.
Obesity plan. Let's see if we got Corey back here to wrap up the story.
Is it finally working? I have you, do you have me? There we go. Yeah, as I was saying, Clarkson had given birth to her daughter River Rose, so of course that's going to affect her weight a little bit. Of course, not in every case, but in this one it did. And she's even puzzled by the fat-shaming comments when first asked about them by Heat magazine. After the reporter explained who Hopkins is and what she said, Clarkson simply laughed. So glad to hear that Kelly Clarkson's got a sense of humor. And as for Miss Hopkins, you're lucky Jade Goody is dead, and you got the title now. Oh wait, I screwed that up. It should be Jade Goody, you're lucky you're dead, so that you don't have to have the title of most hated British woman. I'm sorry. I screwed. Either way, that sounds wrong. Forgive me, folks. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. You can tell it's time to wrap up the entertainment report. I hope to entertain you instead of insult you tomorrow.
Too much bad.
Till then, Jake, take it away.
Too much.
Yes, I flubbed that up very badly. I admit it. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, folks. That wraps up tonight's entertainment report, and that is the Evan Miller Report for this Thursday, March the 5th, 2015. I'm Jason Miller. For all of us here at SHR Media, we wish you a great night. Coming up next is the Exceptional Conservative Show with Ken McClinton. Again, for Corey Evan, I'm Jason Miller saying so long. Good night, everybody.